What's up, everyone? This is Evan Tom with Coldwell Banker Realty. I am super excited to finally share with you my new monthly series, Stats Don't Lie. Here, I'll be going over the Oahu real estate market monthly in terms of its updates, and in the next 15 minutes or so, give you a better understanding of where the market is, where it's potentially going, and takeaways for you to bring back home. Now, I'll be going a lot further in depth on a lot of these specific topics in the future, so if you do like what you see, come join along and enjoy in the journey. Now, before we go any further, I do have to set a few disclaimers for you. First, none of this is financial advice. These are simply my own thoughts and my insights from analyzing data and sources around the interwebs. This is also simply my opinion and does not reflect that of Coldwell Banker as a company. Now, the second disclaimer I need to share is that this is really for infotainment purposes. What that means is education presented in a funny way. None of the jokes included are meant for anything other than that. Now, if you do like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you want to follow along on this journey and share some of this content, then follow me on all my social media platforms. And again, if you do need any help, please contact me for any of your real estate needs. Now let's get into it. How we do is the basic summary of what we're going to be going over today. First, we're going to go over understanding what the stats mean. We're going to be talking about macroeconomic impacts. We're going to then review the numbers for the monthly update, and we're going to go through our takeaways or TLDRs for you. Now, in terms of understanding the stats, there's two different indicator types. You have the leading indicators, which are your median days on market, and your lagging indicators for sales price. And the reason that this is the case is it takes quite a bit of time for the time a unit that hits the market for it to be sold and reflected in the price. So if we're looking squarely on the monthly stats, what it shows, which is very interesting, is that everything regarding price is going up. So you see the median sales price going up, but everything in terms of the leading indicators that lead to price are going down. There's less demand in terms of closed sales, and days on market is taking a little bit longer. But we'll go over all of the details and what that means a little bit further. The second thing we need to go over is supply and demand, because that's a reflection of the price. Now, on the supply side, you have new listings and active inventory. On the demand side, you have pending sales, total inventory in escrow, and percent of original list price received. Again, we'll be going over all those terms a little bit later in this presentation. Now, when we think of supply and demand, it's ultimately on this pendulum of where things are drawing towards, and that is going to be impacting price. And there's actually one great indicator that reflects that balance itself. Now, I think the best indicator is what's called the month's supply of inventory, because ultimately it's a ratio that reflects what active listings are, that would be your supply, and average pending sales, so how it's going through in terms of the demand side. Now, one of the most important factors that's not reflected on the monthly stats is your interest rates. And we can see that as your macroeconomic indicator. Now, we'll be using three different examples of monthly payments due to the change in the interest rates lately. Now, those three scenarios are actually not too far. They're in the last year. They're going to be December 2021, the middle of this year in June, and now in October. We'll be using the stats that we just presented earlier for the $1.1 million for the median sales price, and we got to make a few assumptions. So the three assumptions we'll make is down payment is 20%, which is standard. Your credit score is the best credit score available, and to compare apples to apples, it's just going to be your principal and interest. Now, in terms of the three scenarios, the difference in the interest rate payments is 3% at the end of last year to 5% the middle of this year, and just recently it jumped to over 7% in October. And if you want to see a little bit more about it, I have that in the little red box for you to see how much it's changed. Now, if we're thinking about it from the numbers itself, at the 1.1 million at 3%, you have $3,700 for the monthly payment. It jumps to 4,700% at 5%, and almost $6,000 in scenario 3. And what that means is a 27% increase in monthly payments and a 61% increase from if you bought last year. But I think the better indicator of trying to figure out what it means is when we talk about buyer purchasing power. Now, if we flip the script of what the typical and the same monthly payments are going to be, that $1.1 million at 3% drops all the way down to $875,000. Now, what that means is a buyer with their loan with the same monthly payments can only now afford $875,000. And where interest rates are today, that drops all the way under $700,000. So this is one of the best indicators to say, okay, this is how it's impacting a buyer's ability to buy. And you can see it if we chart out mortgage applications. So this is at the very, very early stage of when you're buying, and that interest rates, when it's dropping, mortgage applications go up, and when interest rates go up, does the opposite effect. It's something like that. Now that you do have some context, I want to give you two options. We have on one side the red pill, which is to say, I'll help you understand what the world truly is from the data and stats that I'm seeing myself. Or if you want to take the blue pill, it's probably time to close that tab right now. But let's get into it and assume that you are the chosen one and you want to know a little bit more. Now, if we're getting into the leading indicators for median days on market, you pull up this graph. I mean, what does it mean? It's a little bit complicated. It shows it's going up and it's going down. Now, all of the stats are going to be separated between your single family homes and your condos. Generally speaking, it should trend, and I'll kind of explain why it hasn't maybe a little bit later on, but also in future videos. But we have to put some indicators to say what actually it means. So what I wanted to reflect is, compared from supply to demand, how does that impact the median days on market, and how does that show where we are in the market? Now, for the last 2 years, it's been red, which has meant that demand has significantly outpaced supply, and as a result, prices have shot up. But now we're very closely going, especially for single family, back into the neutral territory, while condos are a little bit more robust in terms of the median days on market. Now, going to the next indicator, it's the lagging indicator, and we use the same scenario of, okay, let's put in some of those boxes for supply and demand, and as you can see here, it tracks the same. It's fairly similar of an judgment, because what you're seeing is it's leading of saying, hey, this is where the demand is looking like, and this is how it's going to reflect the price. So you do see that there is a lag of about 3 months. But what you see here also is that prices have peaked, and we'll go over that very shortly. Now, if we're looking at it just from the supply and demand standpoint, from the supply, new listings means anything that's come on the market just for this month. It's really showing this is your active supply kind of entering the market. And I think one of the interesting things when I put these 3 boxes on it is that it's very similar. You do see some seasonality through the year, but these last 3 years, when you think there might have been a significant change, it hasn't changed too much for Hawaii. And what that means is new supply coming on market has been fairly stable. Now, if we look at it from the perspective of active inventory or total supply on the market, what you see is a little bit different. Now, for the single family side, it's getting much closer already to where it was before we had the COVID boom. But for condos, on the other hand, it's still closer to the beginning than the end, and it shows that from a supply perspective that it's much more stable in terms of where it looks. Now, I know it's been about 8 minutes now. Are we there yet? And we're almost there. We're over half of the point of no return, and so we must continue. Now, if we look at it from a demand perspective, pending sales constitutes things that have gone under contract for this month. So it really does reflect what active demand may look like. You see something similar to the new supply that does come on the market, in which that there is some type of cyclicality or seasonality to the where the market is going month over month. But the second thing that I really see is that it's gone down quite a bit further, where we were is a lot further back than where we were before. And that pending sales is actually 36% down from where we were last month when you kind of aggregate the entirety of it. Now, if we look at it from the total inventory and escrow, this is your total demand, you see a very similar story. Seasonality is there, but also demand total has softened. Now, if you kind of add all of these impacts together, you get some type of ratio for a percent of original list price. Now, what that means is if you are a seller, you put your home on the market, and if it does sell for what you listed for, it's at that 100%. And I'm a believer that's a little bit more a reflection of the psychology of sellers in pricing their home, because we're talking about expectations, but it nonetheless tells the same story, is that single family homes went up significantly more in terms of price and it's coming down. And for condos, it's been relatively stable, where it's been at 100% for the last year and a half. And if you want to see, put a little red line on the left side that reflects to say that 98% is where we were before COVID and where it was much more a neutral market, to get an idea, again, of another indicator of where we're tracking from some different indicators. Now, if we go to my holy grail of indicators of months supply of active inventory, we get this chart. Now, as we see here, I put some lines on there again to give you just an idea of where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. It's the same thing for what we saw in a previous chart, in which for condos, it's still relatively low compared to where we were pre-2020, while for the single family market, it's trending upwards very close to that. Now, what that means is the balance between demand and supply, that single family home on the whole is much softer of a market than condos, and therefore pricing presumably will follow that as well. But I am tired. I know, we've been doing this for some time, but don't worry, because my cats were just as tired when I was putting together this presentation for you today. But the good thing here is we are at the end. It's time for your goodie bags, and I have 3 takeaways for you today. Now, the first takeaway I have for you is interest rates significantly impact the real estate market. Your macroeconomics is going to impact the environment everywhere. But if we're looking at it from 3 different times, from short term to medium term to long term, and we start with short term, what do we see? Is that as interest rates fluctuate, so if it goes up, prices are going to come down. If it starts to flatten out, prices will start to flatten out. And if interest rates start to come down, then prices will increase. But if we're talking about that midterm, 6 months to 2 years, what are we looking for? I can't really answer it for you because I don't have a crystal ball, but I can ask 2 questions for us to think about, and I can share with you macroeconomics in a future video. First one is going to be how long until interest rates peak, because we haven't quite gotten there yet, unfortunately. And the second one is what happens to rates after hitting its peak. Is it going to stay the same? Is it going to start dropping? And that's the biggest question in the medium term for pricing. Now, in that long term, the biggest question to ask is how does the market adjust when we start to see a decreasing interest rate environment? If it follows any of the historical precedents, I think you know the answer is prices will start to come up. And that's the truth number 1, is that market cycles unfortunately are real, and what goes up must come down. Now, the second takeaway for you is that demand and supply balance matters, especially where you are in your local environment. Now, demand is decreasing, and it's very clear from both market segments, while new supply is staying relatively flat from both market segments. But what does that mean for prices for you? For the single family aspect, that there's lower current demand and a little bit higher total inventory, which more than likely is going to lead to lower prices. Now, condos have the same lower current demand, but it's a much flatter total inventory, which means that there is much more balance, and therefore there's a higher probability that there is a little bit more of a neutral market, but more than likely due to interest rates, that'll impact it and probably follow that lower prices. And that comes to truth number 2, which is the problem with real estate is that it is local. You have to understand the local market. Just as like homes are different, such as single family versus condos, the neighborhoods, renovations, the condo building, the side that the condo building faces, if it's 500 square feet versus 550 square feet of a stack, those things all matter. And so choosing a realtor that really understands the local environment you're in within the broader macro context will really help you navigate this changing market. Because a lot of people have never been investing or in real estate for longer than one cycle, which typically lasts 8 to 10 years. And understanding the historical context of where we've been, how it's ended, how it's begun again will help to shape where we are going. And I'll share that with you in a future video as well. Now, the third one is why we're buying. Why are you buying? Now, if it's to live, wouldn't you want to buy at a sale than a premium? And if we were buying clothing, you would definitely buy 10 houses, but it definitely seems like now in this environment, it's turned to 0. And it follows a pretty funny meme that's been going around the internet, in which a couple is talking to their agent and they say, we'd really like to see something a little bit less expensive. And the agent responds, okay, I can show you this house again tomorrow. Now, it's really tongue-in-cheek of explaining how the market is and where people are, but the big thing is you got to understand sentiment. And the difference between buying and renting is that in a high interest rate environment where we are today, you can actually still refinance to lower your monthly payments. I did that the last couple of years, but you can't renegotiate a lower rent. Now, if we're talking about straight investing, the big things you want to worry about are, do the numbers make sense? Because if prices are coming down, it might make the numbers work. And if you're buying as an investment or a rental and they work, why wouldn't you pull the trigger? The second one is focusing on risk mitigation. Because real estate is a long-term illiquid asset that you really don't have to and want to be forced to make a move when you're not ready, because it's going to be very expensive. Now, if we're talking about why we're selling, in terms of the timeline on the short term, this is where the majority of sellers are going to be, so we'll just focus on that. Two things here. One, you have to understand where we are in the market, that we are in a neutral to down market. And two, you need to adjust your expectations, because the reality, unfortunately, is in front of us, not behind us, and behind us is history. Now, having a great example for us, I kind of took out the actual information for the listing, but you don't want to be this person, because it was a flip that they bought for $960,000. They spent quite a bit of money in it. They listed it shortly after in March when we were peaking for $1,300,000, and 200 days later, price is where they bought it for. They've been sitting on it in terms of investment, and they're definitely going to lose money. So that's one of those things where you need to kind of understand where we are in the macroeconomic, because this is a very, very expensive lesson. And that leads us to the truth number 3. For buying, the best time to buy ultimately is answering the 3 questions. When you're ready for it, what you can afford, and 3, where it makes you happy. Because when you're buying to live, it just needs to fit those time horizons. And you can't ever match it completely with where we are financially in the market, but if it makes sense, it makes sense. And again, it's where you live, and it's a little bit different discussion than when you're strictly investing. Now, if we flip it to why we're selling as a truth number 3, the best time to sell ultimately is on your own terms and before you are forced to. So hopefully this information will help you to guide your decision making. And for a lot of sellers, it's not the best time for you to do it, but there are specific things for you to think about, which is to say that you really want to focus on pricing it right and selling now, getting an offer and moving on, because the best time for you to get your price where we are trending is now. So if you like this video, if you enjoyed my content, please like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on all my social media platforms, and if you do have any questions, you want to have a conversation, or you want to work with me, please contact me. I'm more than happy to help you. Let's get started.